Times News, and I'm here with Greg Charlop.
Hey.
We're in San Francisco, and we're talking about senior housing today. And so the first thing is, when we talk about senior housing, is senior housing a big deal? What's going on in the world, and I guess, is it a big deal? Is there enough senior housing? Or is there too much senior housing? We've got a lot of baby boomers, so we're going to have a need for this at some point, right? So what's going on?
Well, Saul, thanks for interviewing me. I appreciate it, and welcome to San Francisco.
Thank you.
My town, so I'm glad to have you up here in the real part of California.
Yeah, we actually love it up here.
So senior housing, a lot of people don't think about it, but it actually is a pretty big problem. According to the New York Times, if you look at all homeless people in America, about 30% of them, about a third of them, are over 50. So imagine, you're probably past a lot of the prime working years of your life, you're homeless, things are probably not going to get better. It's unlikely you're going to get a job. Your situation's not going to improve on its own. This is a pretty tough spot to be in. And then if you look beyond that, if you look at all seniors, about a quarter of all seniors live alone. And, these folks, they're at risk for bad problems. A lot of people, if they live alone, seniors who live alone, it's called senior loneliness or senior isolation. So a lot of them, they get depressed, so they're by themselves. They have higher rates of dementia. And they have earlier death. So senior loneliness is really a big problem. And then on top of that, seniors who live alone, unfortunately, are higher rates for elder abuse. There's no one to look after them to make sure they're okay, so elder abuse is a big problem. So senior housing is a big thing. And then the other issue is it's expensive. Most forms of senior houses, they're just expensive. So a lot of seniors, they're faced with this almost Sophie's choice of paying for nice housing and squandering their nest egg or saving money for their kids and not really having a place to live.
So it's really not even, if you think about it, senior housing, it's senior living is what we're really talking about, is what do seniors do for living, and there are issues way beyond just the property itself, just the facility itself. There are these other things that you mentioned, these other issues with seniors. And then there's so many seniors and so many more seniors coming. Right? So it's like, it's huge. And then who thought 50 years old, a third of the homeless people over 50? I never heard that before. 25% of the people who are seniors live by themselves. I never heard that before. So these are interesting. These all to me kind of sound like senior living, and then seniors have a hard time for a number of reasons finding property that suits their particular needs. What are we doing now about this? Is anything being done for, I'm sure things are being done, but where are we if we consider senior living an issue or a problem, where are we in solutions?
Right, well, I'm glad you asked. So there are a few solutions that people are doing, but I don't think any of these are perfect, but it's good to look at what's going on now. So one thing is aging in place. That's a popular thing. People talk about aging in place a lot. And the idea is you live in your house essentially as long as you can, in theory and indefinitely. And it's nice in a way because your house, your neighborhood, you're comfortable there. I mean, it's got a lot of advantages. The trouble is that, for these seniors who live alone, if you're aging in place, you might become even more lonely and more isolated because you're just by you, in your own house. And a lot of these people, maybe their families moved out. Their spouse perhaps has died, their neighbors or friends that they've known for many years, maybe they've moved away or they've passed away, so they could be alone. And then on top of that, if if their house is in an isolated area, it wouldn't be true in San Francisco, but in a lot of places your house might be isolated, you can't drive, and you're aging in place, you may be physically stuck in a small area, which isn't so good. The other thing about aging in place is, to do it properly, your house has to be very ADA friendly, like there really shouldn't be stairs, everything should be easy to open, stuff like that. And a lot of people, their houses just aren't set up right for that. Another thing is co-living or co-housing. That's kind of a cool thing that's catching on. There's different ways to do it. One way is the Golden Girls style. You've got a bunch of people and they're all living in a house and maybe each one has their own bedroom and then there's a community common area. It's almost like roommates, and that's a great way because you've got friends, you have a social network, that kind of thing, but you don't have much privacy, in that. A different way to do it is you could have planned houses where they're arranged around a common area. It's sort of designed this way. You'd have a bunch of townhouses, for example. So each person has their own house, but there's still a common area, maybe with like a big living room and a kitchen and a garden and stuff like that. So everybody sort of pitches in to keep the common area up. It's almost part of the HOA, but then people have their own houses. I think that's a great idea. You know, the trouble with that is there just aren't a lot of these arranged setup like this, and also, you know, you have to be pretty physically active to live in these, because it's part of your responsibility to keep the common area up. So a lot of people, they just can't do it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, another option, of course, is moving in with family. You know, so, you know, unfortunately, just it doesn't happen that much in the U.S. You know, not a lot of people move in. Maybe the kids don't want their relatives moving in, or their house is too small.
The kids can't afford to have them in.
Kids can't afford to have them in, or maybe the seniors don't want to do it because they feel bad, you know, imposing on their kid. And then the last and the most common thing is just these senior communities, you know, like retirement communities.
Yeah.
You know, and the trouble with those is a lot of times they have pretty strict rules. So you've got people, and they're perfectly capable people, but they have all these restrictions. You know, they may not be able to smoke or drink. I mean, not that I advocate that, but if you
no freedom.
They don't have freedom. You know, maybe they can't have pets. They may not be able to have overnight guests.
Yeah.
Plus, these things are really expensive. You know, near here in Oakland, not far from where we are now, they opened up this senior community like this. It's $10,000 a month to live there.
Yeah.
Now I realize the Bay Area is probably more expensive than some other places, but still, that's a lot of money. So the options out there, they're limited.
Well, and some of these senior facilities have different levels of care as well, right? So they have, with the different levels of care come different pricing, and where people need more care, then they end up paying more. But you're right, that my mother was in a home like that, and it was very, very expensive. When we ended up coming up with our own solution, which was building a room on the back of my sister's house so that my mother could live there.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So what are you suggesting, any solutions to these? Because there's a number of different problems we've identified here. What's the solution?
I'm glad you asked. So, you know,
I'd have to sooner or later.
I appreciate it. So, you know, my goal, of course, there's a few big goals first. You know, one is it has to be affordable, right? I mean, most people have to be able to buy into this. If it's too expensive, it just won't work, you know? And so it needs to be affordable that most people could buy into. It needs to preserve people's dignity or autonomy. So I want it where people are living, they're able to have pets or overnight guests, or if they want to stay up to 4 o'clock in the morning, watch TV really loud, which I don't advocate, you know, you could do it, you know, because you're an adult and that's your choice.
Yeah.
And I want something that doesn't isolate people, that allows people to live near relatives or live near friends and people aren't alone. So what I propose is using specially designed or customized tiny houses or container houses. And the idea is that all the tiny houses would be ADA compliant. So the doorways would be right for a wheelchair, you know, everything would be easy to open, easy to use, there'd be no climbing, you know, the storage is easy to access, a lot of things would be automated. You could have voice assistants, you know, like Alexa, for example. So you could tell the house to do things.
Right.
You know, it'd be set up so you wouldn't expect people to
Smart houses.
Smart houses, right. But smart houses, it would come out of the box that way, so it's already set up. And then it would solve the problem of loneliness, because you could, for example, put these in your kids' or relatives' backyards if they had the type of place. So that wouldn't really work in San Francisco, but a lot of places you could, you know, if you had enough land.
So it's like a solution for granny flats, or they used to call them, where properties are zoned for an extra unit,
right,
or for a family unit,
right.
And as long as the zoning allowed it, then this is you're talking about a construct itself that could be placed on the property.
Exactly, and it has some cool benefits. Like you could have, you know, grandma could watch the kids, or you could have grandma over for tea. But then at the end of the day, you know, she goes to her spot, you go to yours, and you're not stepping on each other's toes. And a lot of municipalities, like California, made it a lot easier recently to make these. They simplified zoning for these. And a lot of other places are doing that too, because they realize that, you know, there's a big housing crisis in general. And these detached, you know, these ADUs offer a possible solution. And then another option is you could take them and you could cluster them together, and you could make almost like
communities.
A community or a co-living space. You know, you have a bunch of these, and then you have a common area, you know, where people can hang out and do things. So you could create essentially a co-living space with these as well. So there's a lot of ways to go with it.
So really, it's once you've got some designs, some structure designs, then there's a number of places where they could be located. They could be located on existing properties with a single-family home, family. You could even if the zoning allowed it, create a whole subdivision in a way of tiny homes that cater to seniors.
Right.